Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another round of World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arleth. The United States on Wednesday slapped sanctions on senior Hungarian government official Antal Rogan under the Global Magnitsky program for his involvement in corruption. Meanwhile, the opposition Tisza party is calling for snap parliamentary elections in Hungary. And now joining me to discuss the impact of these sanctions on Mr. Rogan and prospects for the opposition is Dorka Takácsy, researcher at the Center for Euro-Atlantic Integration and Democracy. Hello, and thank you very much for joining me on TVP World.
Hello, good evening.
Now, the timing of these sanctions, this is what I'd like to start with. Why now? Was this a last-ditch effort, in your opinion, of the Biden administration, or since it was because due to the Magnitsky Act, is it independent of the administration?
This is a very good question that no one really knows the answer to. What we know is, however, that the process as of getting Mr. Antal Rogan on this list was already initiated long ago, years ago. Therefore, we can see that this was a pretty long process. However, the announcement of putting him on the Magnitsky list, eventually that cannot really be divided from the fact or taken absolutely separately from the fact that yes, Ambassador Mr. David Pressman is leaving Hungary pretty soon. So eventually, this is how, for instance, and this is why the Hungarian governmental propaganda and the government speaking talking faces, they frame the whole thing as a pity and pitiful personal vendetta of Ambassador David Pressman against the Hungarians. However, this could really be far from truth, and it could really be hardly further from truth. So eventually, this looks like it was absolutely not a personal decision of him. However, the timing obviously is indicative.
Right, the U.S. ambassador to Hungary, David Pressman, he's been quite a vocal figure against Viktor Orban's government. Now, Donald Trump is a good friend and admirer of Viktor Orban. Do you think Trump can just make these sanctions go away, or due to the legal nature of the Magnitsky Act, this will be rather difficult?
Looks like it's going to be a rather difficult process, even in case of political will in place. So the thing is that in order to remove him from the list, which is apparently going to be one of the key priorities of Hungarian foreign policy in the upcoming years, most likely, but this is not that easy. So Donald Trump can certainly not undo the whole thing by a single pen stroke. So in order to get someone off the list, we have to apply a different logic, a reverse logic to usual court cases, because eventually it's going to be the sanctioned person who has to prove that he is no longer involved in corruption-related acts. So eventually, that is on the one hand a rather difficult thing with regards to how the Hungarian state apparatus is operating. On the other hand, this is not single-handedly Donald Trump who has to countersign it, but there has to be the Attorney General, the Finance Minister, and also the Justice Minister countersigning this. Therefore, we can see that even in case of political will from the U.S. administration, it's going to take time for sure.
Going to take time. Okay, well, now, how is this going to impact U.S.-Hungarian relations? How is this going to impact Viktor Orban, even domestically? As you mentioned, they're trying to spin this a different way, but what real impacts will this have?
Well, the clear impacts are still in question, because eventually how these sanctions are going to work depend a lot on the implications. However, how these sanctions work is that eventually they are like Damocles' sword, because the thing is that no one really knows. I mean, it is unknown to the public how the sanctions exactly are applied, because there are such things as secondary sanctions and also for third parties. Therefore, it puts into risk every single person, entity, organization who wishes to engage in business with the sanctioned entity. Therefore, it is far from only a ban on entry to the US, and it's far from only an asset freeze to the sanctioned person, but it has way more widespread implications. However, what it's exactly going to entail is yet to see.
Okay, well, corruption. Corruption has been brought to the forefront. Do you think this is more of a breaking scandal, or is this something that was widely assumed? How dangerous is it for Viktor Orban?
I would say that it depends on the implications because eventually Antal Rogan is clearly a key figure in the government. Therefore, his activities and his role can really not be taken and understood separately from the government. So, how it's going to impact the government's everyday life and deeds and the whole functioning of the Hungarian government close business spheres, for instance, that is a very good question. However, how it comes down politically, that's a different question because Viktor Orban recently, and basically when we look back, it's already a longer process. He has been positioning himself as being a big player, a world politics player, and therefore he was not really paying close attention and has not really been being portrayed as a player who, for instance, takes care of domestic issues such as public transport, the hospitals, education, and so on. Eventually, he has been positioned as someone who is a big player, who is active in the world politics, and so on. And especially the US-Hungary relations have really been put to the forefront. Therefore, if this issue cannot be managed, if Viktor Orban and Fidesz cannot get Antal Rogan off this list, that is going to be a major blow to the image, I would say.
All right, which brings us to Peter Magyar. The opposition, Tisza, has been gaining traction since it launched last year. Opinion polls put him close or even above Prime Minister Viktor Orban. So what are the true possibilities of some snap elections coming up here in 2025? What challenges will Magyar face?
While we cannot exclude the possibility of snap elections, I do not really see them as a viable option or as a really probable option at this moment. Why? Because eventually Fidesz and Viktor Orban, they have really been portraying themselves as the guarantors of peace, stability, and whatsoever. And if they called for snap elections, well, that would shake this image entirely. At the moment, however, we could also list certain positives which could put Fidesz and the government in advantage, for instance, as I'm comparing it to Tisza. Because, for instance, the thing is that Fidesz, obviously, even though its popularity is slowly eroding, it's in the erosion, we can clearly see it from public opinion polls. However, what we can also see that even though the challenger Tisza party is being measured neck to Fidesz, which is something absolutely unheard of in the recent decades, what we can see is that Tisza is far from being an organized party. It is still dominated, and especially its image is still dominated by the one-man show carried out by Péter Magyar. Apparently, there is a wide audience who is clearly receptive to it and highly supportive of this. But the thing is that in order to win the elections, apparently to weaponize the dissatisfaction of Hungarian people is, although necessary, probably not enough, because without an organized party structure, which can be also active on the local levels and so on, it is clearly difficult. And Tisza is apparently, being a super fresh party, being an absolutely newcomer party of last year, is clearly far from being organized and clearly being far from being as organized as Fidesz is. Therefore, snap elections could put them also in a difficult position. But what I would see is that I do not really see the reasons why Fidesz and Viktor Orban would call for snap elections this year.
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw this out there very quickly before we wrap up. Magyar said he could unlock billions of euros in frozen EU funds to boost the economy and rout out corruption. Is this appealing for Hungarians?
I believe absolutely, because the thing is that he does not really delve into policy questions now. He's not doing that yet, especially in order to give hope to these masses of Hungarians who are clearly fed up with the system, who are clearly fed up with EU assets being frozen or being lost entirely for Hungary, for Hungarian people, and they clearly see the economy is pretty bad shape on their own pockets. Therefore, any hope that Péter Magyar can give with promises like this is very appealing to the Hungarian people in general.
Okay, Dorka Takácsy, researcher at the Center for Euro-Atlantic Integration. Thank you very much for joining me today, and we very much appreciate your thoughts on the matter. Absolutely excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.